Hi there, I'm Kimberly, and I just turned 29. Once, I made the questionable choice to marry a man burdened with a mountain of issues. I was under the misguided impression that love could fix everything. I thought I could help him see his own worth. How wrong I was. While love is powerful, it's not a magic wand that can teach someone self-worth. Let's call my ex Joseph. He was consumed by the need to please his parents, not just the usual desire to make them proud, but an all-encompassing obsession that dictated his every move. It was as if his self-esteem was entirely dependent on their approval. As for his parents, whom I'll refer to as Mr. and Mrs. Ellis for anonymity, they were classic disengaged parents. Their lack of involvement left Joseph yearning for their attention and validation, which was truly heartbreaking to witness. I soon realized I couldn't fill the emotional void they created. To make matters worse, Joseph had a terrible habit of draining our savings on extravagant gifts and vacations for them, expenses that were completely unnecessary. It felt like our money vanished directly into Mr. and Mrs. Ellis's pockets, amplifying my frustration. This reckless spending sparked constant arguments, leaving me feeling as though I was in a competition for Joseph's attention with his parents. It was exhausting and toxic for our marriage. Despite the chaos and ongoing disagreements, my feelings for Joseph remained steadfast. I hoped he would eventually break free from his parents' unrealistic expectations and find true happiness within himself. But it became painfully obvious that my love alone wasn't enough to pull him away from their harmful influence. Brace yourselves, the story takes a sharper turn. One day, Joseph approached me, his expression serious, hinting that he had something significant to share. Given our tumultuous history, I prepared for another conflict, unaware of the bombshell that was about to drop. Kimberly, there's something important I need to discuss, he began, setting a grave tone. What's going on? I asked, already bracing for impact. It's about my parents. They're retiring soon, and I've been thinking of surprising them with a luxury vacation. It'll be a pretty penny, he said, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. That sounds lovely, but as long as it comes from your personal savings. I don't want to dip into our joint savings again, I replied, hoping to sidestep another financial argument. I don't have enough on my own. I was hoping to use some of our savings, Joseph admitted, looking hopeful yet anxious. Joseph, if it's beyond what we can comfortably afford, maybe we should reconsider, I suggested gently, trying to ground him in reality. But he quickly lost his cool. You just don't get it, Kimberly. I love my parents. I want to do something extraordinary for them. Love isn't about counting every penny, it's about grand gestures, he argued passionately. I responded, but love also means being there for each other and making sacrifices together, not at the expense of our financial stability. This trip might mean a lot to them, but we have to consider our future too. Joseph remained adamant. I have to do this for them. I thought you of all people would understand. They're everything to me. And you're everything to me, Joseph, but we need to be practical. We can't just deplete our savings for a single trip, I reasoned, hoping to find some common ground. He accused me of being selfish, unable to grasp the significance of his gesture. It's not about being selfish, it's about being sensible and planning for what's ahead, I explained, curious about how much he intended to spend. When he mentioned needing all of it, my heart sank. All of our savings. That's reckless, I exclaimed, shocked by the scale of his request. You're being heartless, he shot back, convinced I didn't understand his desire to make his parents happy. No, Joseph, I'm being realistic. We can't afford to give away $85,000 on a whim, I said, my patience wearing thin. His offhand mention of getting the money back later only deepened my frustration. Really, Joseph? That's not how this works, I snapped, my sarcasm barely hiding my disbelief. It was clear we had reached an impasse, our differing views on love, responsibility, and financial security colliding more than ever. The argument escalated, our voices rising, and soon objects were flying across the room, shattering on impact as if punctuating our heated exchange. In the midst of this chaos, Joseph dropped a bombshell. If you can't support me on this, I want a divorce. He probably expected me to panic, to desperately cling to the remnants of our marriage. Instead, I found a calm resolve within myself. Okay, Joseph, if that's truly what you want. The shock on his face was unmistakable. He had anticipated tears, pleas for him to reconsider, but all he got was my unwavering stance. I was done indulging his fantasies. If he wanted to squander his future chasing shadows, he was free to do so without me. I didn't hold back my words. I laid everything on the table, making it clear that Joseph's endless quest for his parents' approval was as futile as trying to shield oneself from a storm with just an umbrella, an exercise in futility. He tried to counter my points, but a simple raise of my hand silenced him. I expressed my exhaustion from fighting for a love ensnared by unrealistic expectations and an unquenchable thirst for validation. Go ahead and spend your fortune chasing after those who hardly acknowledge you, I said, firm in my resolve to break the cycle of disappointment and empty promises. In that moment, the harsh truth hit him. The grim reality of our situation finally dawned on him. Our marriage had devolved into a battleground, and it was time to raise the white flag and seek peace on separate paths. A month has passed since the divorce was finalized, and I can honestly say the feeling of liberation is exhilarating. Gone are the days of grappling with endless disputes over finances or yearning for validation that was never ours to claim. Now, I breathe freely, unburdened by the weight of his doubts that once cast shadows over my days. The sun seems to shine a little brighter with each new morning. True, Joseph has made attempts to re-enter my life, cloaked in concern and questions about my well-being. But I see through his facade. There's no way I would fall for his ploys again. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I resolutely turned away from his efforts to reignite any spark that once existed between us. I realized I had invested too much in trying to fix someone who wasn't interested in changing. It was time to focus on my own growth and happiness. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. Splitting our shared assets and adjusting to a new financial reality demanded patience and resilience. I had grown accustomed to a certain way of living, but adapting wasn't unfamiliar to me. I embraced the hard work required to reconstruct my life anew, discovering strength and independence I didn't know I had. I hadn't realized what was within me until I rekindled old friendships, dove back into hobbies I had set aside, and discovered new interests. The world suddenly felt vast and full of possibilities, and I was eager to make the most of this fresh start. Of course, there were moments filled with self-doubt and solitude, and adjusting to a new budget was a challenge. The wounds from my dissolved marriage didn't heal overnight, but with each passing day, I found solace in knowing I was no longer sacrificing my happiness for someone else's insecurities. The ease with which I moved forward felt like a sign that I had clung to a lost cause for far too long. It amazed me how much I could achieve once freed from that burden. A month later, I was still navigating these adjustments, but I was flourishing all the same. Joseph's incessant messaging took on a new tone. He now painted himself as the protagonist of a dramatic tale, claiming to be in danger and insisting that I meet with him. Exhausted by his constant attempts to contact me, I knew it was time to confront the situation. Joseph, we've been through this. We're divorced. It's time for us to move on, I stated firmly. Kimberly, please. I just need a moment to explain. I'm in serious trouble and you're the only one I can turn to for help, he implored. Perhaps it was the long absence of his voice, or maybe he truly sounded scared, but against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. Fine, but we're not meeting at my place. Let's go to that cafe we used to frequent. No tricks. Understood? Thank you, Kimberly. I promise I just need someone to listen. You're the only one who understands me, he replied, relief evident in his tone. I know what you're thinking. Why would I agree to meet Joseph after everything? Believe me, I question my own decision, yet there's a part of us that sometimes succumbs to a mix of curiosity and lingering concern, no matter how strong we are. I couldn't ignore his plea. Divorce or not, a part of me still cared. So there we sat, opposite each other in a charming bistro, enveloped by the comforting aroma of coffee. However, not even the pleasant scent could soften the thick air of tension between us. Observing Joseph, anxiety etched across his face as he tried to tug at my heartstrings with those sorrowful eyes, was almost amusing this time. However, I wasn't swayed. Leaning back, I maintained a composed demeanor, ready to hear him out while firmly keeping control. I intended to steer this conversation on my terms. Okay, Joseph, you have my attention for now. What's the supposed danger you're in? And just to be clear, playing the hero isn't on my agenda anymore. I'm done cleaning up your messes, I said, keeping my tone firm yet open. Joseph exhaled deeply, his face a mix of regret and desperation that was almost pitiful to witness. Still, I steeled myself against any emotional manipulation. I know I've made mistakes, Kimberly, but this situation is different. I've gotten involved with some seriously bad people. I owe them a lot of money, and they're not known for their patience, he confessed. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, skeptical of his dramatic tale. Really, Joseph? Dangerous people? Are we revisiting the story of your imaginary friends who always seem to attract trouble? My disbelief was hard to hide. His expression shifted to one of hurt and frustration, clearly hoping for a more sympathetic ear. No, Kimberly, this isn't made up. I'm in deep trouble, and coming to you was my last resort, he insisted, desperation lacing his voice. So let me guess, you spiraled after our divorce, and now you're in debt. Was it that trip you mentioned? I couldn't keep my voice down, drawing curious glances from other cafe patrons. I shot them an apologetic look, trying to regain my composure. I got caught up in something foolish, I admit, but now I'm in a mess that's bigger than I can handle alone, Joseph said, his gaze pleading. My frustration was close to boiling over. How could he waltz back into my life with yet another crisis? Yet beneath, I couldn't completely ignore the last shred of empathy I felt for him. How much do you owe? I asked, bracing myself. $45,000, he responded sheepishly. $45,000? Joseph, are you out of your mind? The cafe patrons turned their heads, their stares sharp as knives. This time, I didn't bother to apologize for my outburst. If they were in my shoes, hearing what I was hearing, they would likely react the same way. Kimberly, please, I'm begging you. I've got nowhere else to turn. I know I've made a mess of things, but you're the one person who really believed in me, Joseph pleaded, his eyes shining with a sincerity that reminded me of the man I once cared for. I once loved him, but those days were long gone. My priority now was self-preservation, even if it meant walking away from him. Don't pull at my heartstrings, Joseph. It's way too late for that, I said, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of his situation. At most, I need $112,000, but I owe $45,000, he replied, his voice a mix of disbelief and indignation. Overwhelmed, he began to cry, oblivious to the uncomfortable glances from others around us. Joseph, calm down. This isn't the place for a scene, I said, trying to grasp the full extent of his predicament. What's going to happen if you don't pay it back? They're threatening to hurt me, Kimberly. I'm not joking. This is really bad, he managed between sobs. I recognized the gravity of his situation and softened a bit. Okay, Joseph, start from the beginning. Tell me everything. He recounted his story, explaining how he had tried to finance an extravagant trip for his parents but had relied on a friend who ultimately let him down, leaving him trapped in significant debt. As he spoke, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, frustration at his recklessness and begrudging amusement at the irony of his predicament. So, you borrowed money from dangerous people to impress your parents who haven't even acknowledged your efforts? I asked incredulously. Joseph's face fell, tears streaking down his cheeks as he faced the bitter truth. It's true. Since that trip, it's like I don't exist to them, he admitted, remorse palpable in his voice. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for him. This was a harsh dose of reality for Joseph, forcing him to confront the consequences of his decisions. Yes, I know the last thing you want to hear is I told you so, but you did bring this upon yourself. I warned you this wasn't a smart move. Worse yet, you chose to divorce me over it. And now look where you are. Sought their approval, invested everything into their wishes, only to be met with silence. It's a tough lesson, but it's one you needed to learn. My words were heavy with concern and resignation. This situation was a difficult reality for both of us. Joseph had pinned his self-worth on people who couldn't appreciate his sacrifices, and I had to accept that I couldn't shield him from his own choices any longer. As we sat in silence, the weight of our past, filled with broken promises and dreams, pressed down on us. At that moment, I realized it was time to let go completely. No more second chances. Joseph needed to confront the repercussions of his actions on his own, and I had to pursue my happiness elsewhere. I do hope you find a way out of this, Joseph, I said, my voice tinged with a finality that surprised even me. You're not going to help? Joseph looked at me in disbelief. What the heck? No, Joseph, I can't help you. Why not? He pressed. Because I don't have the resources to bail you out. And even if I did, taking a loan and spend a lifetime repaying is out of the question. I can't afford to be as careless as you've been, I explained, my resolve firm. Come on, Kimberly, please. I'm begging you, he persisted, his desperation clear. Expecting me to solve this for you, Especially with how you're acting is unrealistic, I said, my patience wearing thin. Yeah, I did expect that. You're my ex-wife, not my enemy, he replied, still clinging to a sliver of hope. But it was clear our paths had diverged too far. My journey was about finding peace and joy independent of the chaos that surrounded him. And that's exactly the problem, Joseph. You assume I'll always be around to pick up the pieces because that's what I've always done. I was your wife. It was natural for me to help you out of your troubles. But I can and shouldn't keep doing that. It's not my job or my responsibility. After everything, I don't owe you anything, especially considering how our hard-earned money was wasted on your toxic parents. It's because I love them, Joseph said. But I love myself too, I replied. Loving myself means doing what's best for me, which includes protecting my well-being. Joseph lowered his gaze, a sign of concession. He understood the assistance he sought wouldn't come from me. Since you seem to be out of options, I'll offer you one piece of advice. Move somewhere far away where they can't reach you. If that's not something you can manage, then I'm not sure what more you expect from me. He sat there silent, his demeanor shifting to irritation, seemingly upset by my firm stance on not rescuing him this time. It's time for us to go our separate ways, Joseph. I can't allow myself to be pulled back into the turmoil of your life. We both deserve to find our peace, I said, hoping you'd understand. If you wished me well, you'd help, he retorted. Goodbye, Joseph. I'm changing my number, I declared, standing up to leave. As I walked away, Joseph remained seated, his expression a complex mix of feelings. It was a difficult yet essential step for the sake of my happiness and self-respect.